So tonight I thought that we would paint a seascape. So I know I paint a fair few of those, but I suppose that's because I live near the sea, and I really have to paint what I see, what inspires me. And when I used to live in the UK and travel to Europe, it was always seemed to be mountains and things. So, and Machu Picchu if I went to, Peru or that sort of thing. But tonight's going to be a bit of a seascape, so we'll just see how we go. I don't really have a huge plan, but we'll just start to bring some clouds in here a bit. We'll try and create a bit of a subject over here. We'll just bring in, we're going to have the horizon kind of about here. And then we might just have a few dots of really light clouds here. And then we might just bring it up. So that's cerulean blue I've just put on there. And I'm just going to bring in a little bit of that mix of cobalt blue and light red. And then I've just rinsed my brush out. And then I'm getting rid of excess water. So I can just start to kind of feather that in. And then I'm going to rinse it out again. And I can flick it. And then I can just feather again. Really nice light touches, and it's just a way of just blending a bit. Nice. And then we might just bring in a little bit more colour here. Let's just get a bit more water, or a bit of dots there, that's okay. Right. Just going to get a little bit more cerulean blue, just to make it a bit more interesting. Get a bit more of that mix. Get that a bit darker, bit darker, bit darker. Nice. Let's just bring this down into here. And then what I might do is just bring in a little bit of... We'll see how this cauliflower's out. It's sometimes quite nice to start to put in the land masses. Or just get that off a bit. So I'm just using the tissue to get that off a bit. And we'll just bring in a bit of landmass over here. Maybe we might bring in a bit more there. We'll bring in a little bit of, we've got a little bit of a mix here of Winsor blue red shade and light red. Let's just bring that in there. Let's just have a look how this is going here. We might just rinse that for a second. So I've rinsed it out. I've got beautiful, clean, fresh water on the hake. And then again, I'm just going to feather this a bit, but I don't really want to interfere too much with this beautiful movement that's occurring. I'm just going to, a little set of tweezers here, I'm just going to get rid of some of these stray hairs. Take the hair off and go again. Yep. And here you've got to make sure when there's a hair on the white of the page, you've got to make sure your tweezers didn't have any pigment on it. So you've got to clean the tweezers off, because if you've picked it up where there's a lot of pigment, you could then easily just dump a bit of pigment where it's nice and light there. Alright. Let's give it a bit more landmass here. Let's give it a bit more landmass. Let's make this dark. So we'll get this a bit more. Bring that in. We might just rinse it out. So I don't waste too much pigment, because sometimes you pick up a fair bit of pigment in the brush and you don't really want to rinse it all out all the time, but you can spray it back into the bowl if you want. just bring in a little bit here. I'm just going to bring this in here. A bit more of this, we'll wrap it around here. Fix that up later. Maybe I shouldn't have done that just then, but anyway, that's alright. See how the brush then didn't have enough pigment, so it's lifting it off the page. You've got to make sure that your brush, if you're wanting to lay down more pigment, it's got enough on there that it's going to bring it in. Alright, I'm just going to leave that brush loaded up with that. And then I always wet a brush before I use it, because otherwise it'll behave differently. So now we're just going to bring in a little bit of maybe a bit of cerulean blue. And then we'll bring in a bit of cobalt turquoise light. It's always a beautiful colour, a bit of turquoise light. I suppose not very realistic, but still beautiful nonetheless. Let's just bring this in around here. A moment. Just need a little bit more of this blue here. Let's get a bit of cobalt turquoise. Target back here. Cobalt turquoise light. And what we'll do is we'll just get this hake brush here full of fresh water, and we're just going to brush, not too many times, but a little bit over here. Don't want to do this too much, you could really spoil some of that, but right, so at the moment what we're doing, because we're painting wet in wet, everything is soft. That's okay, because we can come back later on and produce some harder. The other thing is that we can come in with a tissue here and just clean up a bit of that. It makes it a little bit harder, a little bit of a harder edge. A little bit here. Turn the tissue. These tissues, by the way, I'm never buying these tissues ever again. Aloe vera and vitamin E, Kleenex, terrible. They're not soaking up any moisture. They're just wiping moisture across the page, which is a total waste of time. So they're on special, but bad choice. Right. That's better. A tissue that actually works. So, lesson learned there. Just get the old cheapo ones. Don't have any of that aloe vera and other stuff. You know, they don't actually work properly. Alright, so I'm just going to dry this now and we'll see what we've got. So a couple of things that's worth mentioning here. I took a little while to get these hairs off the page, and you can kind of see where they were, here. Another thing is while I was drying there was a big puddle of pigment here, so I wiped it out. And you could really do that if you wanted to have a few more edges to the clouds, you could just get a wet brush like this round sable here, and then you could just bring in where you think maybe some tops of those clouds might be, and then just bring it out. Fairly wet brush, you know, and just bring it in a little bit like that. You could even create some pockets in the clouds if you want. You'd let it sit there for a little bit. You've got to let it soak in a bit before you go to wipe it out, so that it really has a chance to just let that pigment that's quite dry moisten again. So then we should be able to just lift that out and create some clouds there. So you could do that. Sometimes you can do detail of hills or mountains or something like that. But you know, it's just interesting. You can do some things like that to create some good textures and edges and some interest if you wanted to. That's the lovely thing about watercolour, is that you can lift out if you haven't pushed that pigment into the paper, and certain pigments are more staining than others, then you can really lift back out fairly well. So next step is for me to have a bit of definition somewhere. So I'm just going to make this a little bit more defined and maybe part of this, but I'm not going to define it completely because I quite like a little bit of obscurity too, like some soft edges and some hard edges. I always like. So I'm just going to have a look at this from a distance, and then I'll make a decision what I'm going to do next. So I'm just going to sketch in some detail here, and I might just keep that a bit soft there, and then right, we get the trusty round sable, a little bit of this. Take out a bit of this, a bit of sea mist. It's nearly always not really definitive, that sort of. I'm just going to tilt this a bit, just so I can just wash this down a bit. Use a flat nylon here. A bit stiffer as a brush. Right, so I'm just going to bring in a few of the sort of the waves, just but not exactly, like just. Right, and then we'll lift these out. I just looked at this from a distance before, and these little headlands off to in the distance weren't quite enough, so I've just added to that a bit. It's a bit more difficult to do that in retrospect, but I thought I'd give it a go. So I'm just going to dry now, and then I'm going to start bringing in some lighter lights, and then I'm also going to start bringing some warmth in the foreground here. I'm just using a razor blade and this metal ruler. Create some really lovely whites. Right. So I'm just going to I'm just going to bring in some foreground and I'm going to paint over a bit of this. I don't really like what's going on here, so I'm just going to paint in over this. So we'll see. This is a bit of raw umber, bit of burnt umber. Get a little bit of yellow ochre in there. Get a bit more burnt umber. Now we're just going to spray this off a bit. I'll just tilt that up a bit. And I actually should have painted over the waves if I wanted to do that before I went adding that in. That was a bit silly. There's an order of operation and that was definitely a bit silly. So I might just, what might I just do? So I'm just going to just work over the top of this without touching this warm too much. I'm just going to soften those waves off. I'll get a little bit of cerulean blue, a bit of mixture. We'll just get a little bit more. There we go. I might just got a bit of a razor here. We'll just a few grasses. Just a little bit of detail, not too much. Nice. Right. I'm going to dry this actually. So that's the thing, you've got to watch. If it's all too wet and then you start trying to lift out lights or doing things, you just turn it into a bit of a quagmire. So I'm definitely better off if I want to try and lift out some lights to dry it. If I wanted to get some things coming in here to make it move wet in wet, I'm better off doing that right now while it's wet. But if I want to lift out some lights here where the page is all lifted up and all damp, I'll damage the paper. It's still too wet, so I need to dry that. Well, we're almost done. Thanks for hanging there. And just one thing, I'm gonna just keep drying, but just very quickly, I don't really like what I did up here. I think it takes the eye away from the painting, so I'm just gonna get rid of that now. So I'm just gonna load up with some water with my big hake brush, and my water I'm loading up with is a bit dirty, but it doesn't really matter because it's the same colour as what's on there. And then all I'm gonna do is just wet across here, so I'll just wet across there like that, and then put that off to the side, and then I can get this brush that's already loaded up with this colour and just bring it in like this, and that'll do. Beautiful. So now I can keep drying, and I've just covered that up, and because I've wet the page first, it'll just diffuse a bit and won't have a hard edge, whereas if I wanted some dry brush I could do that, but I don't really want that because I think it'll take the subject away from the subject, which for me is around here. So the last thing I'm going to do here is just bring in a little bit of dark into the distance here. I'm just going to get a bit of the mix of cobalt blue, light red, and add a bit more cobalt blue to it. Just make it into a bit of a dark blue. Yeah, nice. So I've got a bit of a cobalt blue light red mix with a bit more cobalt blue than normal, and I don't want there to be too much paint coming down onto the page. I'm going to keep some of those areas of white. I'm just going to keep my head out of the way, and rinse it out. This may or may not work really well, but I think it's worth seeing if it does work, because it should give a little bit more contrast off in the distance there. All right. I think that's pretty good. So thanks for joining me tonight in this watercolour seascape tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next episode. Good night, and I'd just like to say thanks very much to all my new subscribers. I know a lot of you have come across from Lois Davidson's channel, you know, because of a shout out, a recommendation. So I'd just like to thank any of you guys who have come across here and are watching any of these. I'd just like to say thanks very much and welcome. And if you've got any questions, then just let me know. I really like to help people love watercolour in the way that I love it. So thanks for joining me tonight, and I'll see you in the next video. Good night. So one last thing that I thought I would add to this painting is, you know, a couple of birds up in the sky here. This is inspired by Jervis Bay down south from us. There's beautiful colour water like this, and often there are seagulls out off the coast there. So I'm just going to put in a couple of birds here. So we'll just put them up here, and this is where you've got to be pretty careful. What you can do is you can get a piece of paper and just practice doing the birds until you're happy with what you're doing. But I'll just put one, and it's just worth thinking about where they might be, just catching some of that wind. I'll try and keep my head out of the way. One there and one here. Sorry if my head gets in the way, I just have to kind of... Nice. Let's put another one just here. Right, beautiful. Birds off the coast. One of them could be a nice big sea eagle or something. But anyway, thanks for joining me and I'll see you in the next episode. Good night. So I just thought I'd zoom in so that you could see the birds that I put in. So I put one in here, here and here. Obviously if you were looking at the actual painting you'd be able to see them fairly easily, but sometimes from a distance it's a bit harder to see them. So thanks for joining me and I'll see you in the next video. Good night.